Hey, everybody. Welcome to Tattva Tuesday. This is Lindsay Warwick, the conduit on Spotify and YouTube as well. Very excited to have Zachary Townesmith on the podcast today. He is a co-founder of the Kula Collective and also lunarsolardesign.com. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. It's really a pleasure to have connected with you over the course of our studies and here on this land, and now to be tuning in with you again on this rainy day. It's been dry for a long time, so the rain here, it rained all night last night, and the bedtime story I told my almost 4-year-old son last night, Kai, was about the fairies who love to come out and dance when it rains at night, and they've been sad for a long time because it's been dry. And then tonight they got to come out and dance all night. So we're pretty psyched here in Sweet Hollow.
Yeah, that's awesome. Your son is so sweet. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. Doing my 300-hour with Kula was definitely shamanic and transformative, and so much beautiful ceremony happened in Tennessee in the mountains there. And actually kind of had a call to that ceremony yesterday. I held space for about 15 women, and I sang the native prayer as we called on the directions, which was part of our closing ceremony in Tennessee, that native prayer song. And so today is also a really big day for me. So it just seems full circle, and I'm just really grateful that you're on the podcast. So Tattva Tuesday, we discuss, your spiritual journey, like how you got onto the spiritual path, and then also, your spiritual offerings, or really anything that kind of just comes to mind. So if you want to share a little bit with us about how you got on the spiritual path first.
Spiritual path. I'm not sure that's the path. Oh. I didn't see the sign marker on the path as I was walking down it.
Right.
No, I appreciate the question. I think that origin stories are really important. We all have very unique ways of approaching this thing called spirit. And mine was I guess it was pretty late in life that I realized that my attraction to nature. I grew up in cities. I lived in Pittsburgh till I was 5, moved to Philly with my mom, grew up in Philly, went to Harvard. So I was in Boston for 4 years, or Cambridge, and then I moved pretty much right after that to Guatemala City. And I was in Guatemala City for 15 years, and lives lived, etc. I met my wife Jessie, and then started living more in rural areas and really being more, I guess, consistently connected to big end nature. Although what you find between the cracks in the sidewalk in Philly is really what sustained me until then, for sure. And it was really when I was in Guatemala that I uncovered a spiritual link for myself. I had been fascinated by and very interested in indigenous cultures throughout my childhood. I just uncovered one of my first book reports on Chief Crazy Horse, and I was like in 4th grade. And I'm not sure where that came from in particular. I didn't know any indigenous people until I went to Guatemala, right? And it was there that I connected with a different way of entering into relationship with nature that was much more intentional, and that was based on this millennium old practice of relating to the unseen and also the seen in nature, and really understanding it from a different perspective, particularly the calendar, the Tzolk'in, the 260-day calendar. I realized that the day that I was born on is connected to, guess what, Mother Nature, right? It is Mother Nature, the Ish, the jaguar, the sacred altars. And so through a deep kind of immersion into I wouldn't say immersion, it wasn't like I was doing it every day, but I was with a good friend who's a day counter in the Mayan tradition, and he's the amazing man Felipe. And I got to go maybe once a month with him for like 10 years, going into the woods, into the mountains, into these beautiful ancient altars that vortexes that have been marked by the Maya people and offered to for years and years, and being able to go to these places again and again in different days of the calendar and understanding the way that they come together, these energies, was really powerful and really connected me to myself and to nature and to spirit in a way that that I hadn't had before. And at the same time, I had met a yogi also in Guatemala City. I was working at the Jesuit University, teaching classes in the communications department, photography and communications and culture and things like that. And in the movement department, there was a Romanian yogi who was like certified by the Indian board. And I was kind of interested in yoga. So I was like, yes, I'm going to his class. And I got there and I remember being kind of in the waiting room and just kind of like doing my basketball kind of warm up, just kind of stamping the ground and, being ready for this yoga class with a real yogi. And this Romanian man comes up, very stern and Eastern European. And he just looks me up and down and says, "What are you preparing for?" And I was like, yoga. And we went in the room and prepared, proceeded to get into a very hatha flow. We practiced maybe 2 or 3 asana. I don't know if you remember my classes from the course, but it's very,
I love it.
like you work up to 5 minutes in each posture. Not yin, this is not about relaxing and falling into postures. It's about finding the comfortable seat, the steer and the sukham, the intensity married with the comfortability of what muscles can I engage. How can I explore my body through this asana? How can I, in particular, understand the energetic connection, earth, sky, polarity, and how different positions of my body can channel that to different areas of my energetic being that could use a refresh or a discharge or whatever it happens to be in the moment. So I was very into yoga. I was very into the Mayan spiritual practice. We were all friends. We would all go to these ceremonies together and combine. Both of my teachers from both ends were very open to experimenting with lots of things. So it was very much a marriage of these things together that brought me onto this spiritual path, which today looks much more like me going out and cutting out fallen trees from the way and building a deck and just kind of being connected to nature with my sons in a way that is less about kind of the ceremonial aspect, with the big C, and more about kind of how can I be present with myself, with nature, with my sons, with my wife, Jessie. And so, that's, I guess, rather long-winded.
I love it. Thank you. And as you were sharing, I'm like, God, what's your Mayan glyph? I learned, I had a woman on the podcast. Her name's Tammy Foster, and she talked about the galactic Mayan calendar, and she decoded me. I'm a yellow overtone sun. I don't know if you know what your glyph is, but I love that timekeeping system.
Actually, I need to give a plug here, and it's that system that you're talking about is called Dream Spell.
Yes.
And it was created by a Mexican anthropologist, and it's sort of based on the Maya. My teacher is very critical of it.
Oh, okay.
Because it is not the Mayan calendar. It's this guy in the 70s and 80s lived with some Mayan elders and decided that he had a better way of doing it than what they were doing.
Oh man. Okay.
And now he's made a lot of money off of it. And so there's a lot of distaste and appropriation that's felt by Mayan elders who have been practicing this millennia-old tradition. And then when you see, just what you said to me, my Maya glyph that's not a Maya glyph. It's a glyph created by Arguelles, who was an anthropologist. And he had galactic downloads, while he was living with these Mayan shaman in the Yucatan Peninsula that allowed him to see things clearer than they had. So whenever you hear that coming from a non-Indigenous person about how they can interpret the Indigenous wisdom in a better way, it's a red flag, you know. And I
Okay.
think that's another thing that I'm really passionate about: social justice and looking at ways in which we can definitely learn from indigenous cultures and
Mm-hmm.
do it in a way that's not extractive, because that has been the model that has been used whether you're talking about, you know, natural resources, whether you're talking about medicines, whether you're talking about spiritual traditions, you know, even cacao ceremonies, which we love
Right.
so much.
Yeah, we
um,
do.
how can we do this in ways that are not extractive but rather
Mm,
collaborative, that are lifting us all up? And it's a challenge. It's a challenge every time we do a cacao ceremony. I have to ask these questions of myself: am I doing this in a good way? Am I doing this in a way that supports the medicine itself, the plant, as well as the people that have kept this alive in the face of genocide for the past 500 years? You know,
mm-hmm.
the Spanish came in and burned every Mayan text they could find. They made big bonfires that lasted for weeks of all the Mayan texts that were found. And now we talk about this culture that died. Well, you know, um, let's look at why, let's look at how, and let's look at how it's still surviving, and then uplift the people that are keeping it alive in ways that honor the tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So while I think that, you know, there's ways in which dream spoke can be interesting and informative and important for people in different ways, it's important to talk about it for what it is. You know, it's a new
Yes.
age, um, uh, new age, with my air quotes, if you're listening to this,
Yeah.
uh, kind of model for understanding cosmic spirituality, which
Mm-hmm.
which may have a lot of relevance. And I don't mean to discount his downloads, you know.
Right.
Um, just be careful about the way it's being used and it's being talked about. And if it's something that interests you, you know, look at the real OG
Yeah.
you know, Mayan calendar, and how this was created by people thousands of years ago, and it's more accurate than the calendar than we use today. And how is this possible? Just starting to dive into, even dip your toes into the Mayan spirituality, for me, has opened up so much respect, honor of these traditions, as well as the natural beauty that supports us every day.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for bringing that to context, because, you know, I'm not a full scholar on any of those things. So, and also open to other opinions and just all the things. So I'm grateful that you said that. And I also honor that, the respect for the culture and the traditional practices. So thank you for mentioning that. And you did mention cacao. I
Mm.
know that, I guess let's talk a little bit about the Kula collective. So this is,
Yeah.
yeah, it's, I did my 300-hour shamanic yoga teacher training with Kula collective last year, and it was so transformative and life-changing. So if you want to talk a little bit about the Kula, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I talked about, you know, being in Guatemala for a while and
Yes.
meeting my wife. She had been in Guatemala for a while, and like I had been there for 15 years, and she had been there for like 7 years or something, and we had crossed paths but never really met. And when we finally did, it ended up being transformative. It was actually literally at a festival on Lake Atitlan over New Year's, called Cosmic Convergence,
I love
and
it.
it was cosmic. And Yeah, so I had been doing lots of work with social innovation and creativity. That I co-founded a nonprofit in Guatemala called Imahitlan, which had the mission of bringing about the society of imagination, really looking at how to bring creativity back into. We particularly worked in classrooms, so I was working with middle school teachers and preschool teachers, as well as also community leaders, and thinking about how to bring more creativity. And through this work, I met a bunch of people and got trained in a facilitating process um, that works on collaborative design. And so I brought this back to Guatemala, and I was tweaking it. I was working with it with communities, and called it flow design, and talked about lunar and solar thinking. Lunar being this way of kind of connecting with the chaotic aspect of nature, to this really like letting things come in and come out without any sort of prefrontal cortex censoring of what's being said. And it's what we think of when we typically talk about brainstorming, right? This I say everything and put it all on the board. And then solar being more convergent, of more analytical, judgmental, and that creativity happens when we're able to separate these out, do all our lunar thinking, and then do our solar thinking. I can talk more about that stuff,
Yes.
but I want to get to your question too, because when I met these Kula folks, I was pretty disgruntled, disheartened, disenchanted with the nonprofit world. I had been, in the nonprofit world for years at that point, even since college, and found myself, unable to do the kinds of things that I felt like communities were really saying that they needed, because I had to translate it into what funders wanted. And then what funders wanted might change after a year of doing it one way. And I had to go back to people, and I was preaching, self-sufficiency. But then I was turning around and doing a song and a dance so that they would pay me. And if they didn't, then I had to turn around to my people that I was saying, do your own thing. And then I had to say, do what I say, not what I do, because I can't come back. And the whole idea of, gathering together the crumbs from the table of the global north and kind of distributing them at our whims in the global south is just problematic. And what I saw it ending up in Guatemala over the hundreds of years that this has been going on is people, with their hands out when you walk into the community. Okay, what's this white guy going to bring me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're expecting. What project is he going to bring in here, and how can I benefit from it? And so I was really frustrated with that. I was looking more at the idea of building social business, of figuring out creative ways to leverage the value of the things we do in an economic fashion, so that it can be circular and regenerative and not reliant on these crumbs. So I was working on that and thinking about that, and then I met Jessie, my wife, and she was working in a yoga teacher training school at that point. And at that point I had been a little bit disenchanted with yoga as well. It turns out that my teacher and his teacher were both potential misogynists. Lots of that vibe of the male yoga movement leader who ends up, the whole point of it is sort of to put himself in a position of power over women so that they can then, the story, you've heard it hundreds of times. So I was disenchanted with yoga. I was disenchanted with nonprofits. I met my wife, who was in this whole system of yoga teacher trainings, which looked pretty cool, but it was kind of the same thing, of a male owner of the company, of the school, founder, who was kind of lots of flags going off. All of her friends that had been working in the similar schools or that school were also disenchanted. And so I started to ask some questions along the lines of the collaborative flow design. People got interested, and they agreed to come together for 2 or 3 days to do the flow design process together collaboratively, decide what is it that our biggest challenge is right now, what's our vision, how can we overcome that. Vision is not how we overcome that. Vision is why we want to overcome that, right? It's like, once we do, what will things look like? And so we spent those 2-3 days coming up with a shared vision. Between at that point, it was 12 of us that started, and some people have moved out, and now it's 7. But that vision and the mission that we created in those days 7 years ago still holds true in everything that we do. And so it was really facilitating these people through a flow design process. And now that we've done that, making consensus the basis for all of our decision making, it's allowed us to deepen our relationships. The thing I'd say about consensus is I don't believe in democracy, because whenever you have a democracy, you're going to have a disgruntled minority, essentially. And if you think about a typical board of 7 people, and I want to start a new project, how many people do I have to talk to about my new project? Basically, 3 other people, right? Do the math real quick. Sorry, it's early in the morning. But there's 3 other people that I have to convince, because then we're 4 and we're a majority. So I know that there's 3 people that might not go along with me. I don't even talk to them. I just talk to the people that I know are on my side. The vote comes up, we vote, push it through, on we go. Flip this to a consensus-based model. Who are the first people I have to talk to? The people that aren't maybe not going to vote with me because I need them to be on board with what I want to do. And so what
Mm-hmm.
it forces us to do is be in a relationship, deep relationship with each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, through things that make sure that as we move forward, everyone is on board. And you may not be 100% like, but at least you consent to moving in that direction. And so we've had very few times when there's been hard no's in the history of Kula as our board. When they've happened, we've stopped and we've reassessed and reproposed and figured out where the compromise can be met around things. So I think that's really like part of our secret sauce and something I'd love to see more and more of in these kind of socially minded businesses, because I believe in regenerative business. I believe that we, it's our creativity that's going to allow us to figure out ways to monetize things that are good for people, planet, and community, right? And not just like create a poison like Pepsi and then sell enough of it that we have so much money that we can give some of it away to do good things, right?
Right.
Meanwhile, we're poisoning people making the money.
Mm-hmm.
How can we do things that are positive? So that's what Kula Collective is. And I actually did the same flow design process with Jessie and her parents and her cousins. And we ended up creating Seven Springs, which is where I'm sitting right now. And it's our retreat center here in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, where we have yoga teacher trainings, where we have forest bathing, where we have permaculture, and different ways of, again, we created this vision of how can we share the natural abundance that we live in with as many people to bring this healing and heal this land as we're healing people, and have cultural and economic diversity as being a cornerstone of our organization, of our business, right? Because essentially we're figuring out how to make this value be valuable for us too. So now I can send my son to a really beautiful nature school that's kind of expensive, but I can do that because we're making enough off of these good things that we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can bring good things to my family. And that's really the kind of closed loop regenerative nature of the kinds of things that I really love to help people create.
Yes.
So that's the Kula in a nutshell.
Just in a nutshell. I love the Kula so much. And Seven Springs is a gorgeous retreat center. I just I'm feeling all the emotions, just knowing that you're right there in that space. And just, the Kula training was so transformative for me. The flow design process was incredible for me. I'm just going back to our cacao ceremony where we were painting, and I painted this vision of my sacred heart. And I'm like, wow, I haven't revisited those notes, and I'm thinking about them right now because I am following the path of my sacred heart now. I'm mentoring with a shamanic rose priestess. So I'm diving into the divine feminine lineage, and just following my heart, doing this podcast. This came out of nowhere a couple months ago. I got, messages from my higher self to do this. So your flow design was incredibly influential. And so I definitely would love for you to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that. The lunarsolardesign.com as well.
Yeah. So again, I got trained in a facilitation process called productive thinking. And this comes from one of my mentors named Tim Herson. I think it's really important, to give as much credit as we can to all our teachers. My teacher, John Dunn, is amazing. Marga Iniguez, I can give some notes if you'd like. I think tapping into some of these elders and the wisdom where these things come from is really important. So anyway, I got trained in this with Tim, and then decided that it needed some tweaking to be relevant to Guatemala in particular, where I was working. So I did that tweaking. And then as I started to work more and more in the context of these yoga teacher trainings, I realized that there was an opportunity there. There was an opportunity for people to do a design process on their lives that would enable them to leave. When you're in these intensive, your process was a little less intensive than many of our trainings are. Yours was over a period of time, but even still, within that period of time, it's almost like you're trying to drink from a fire hydrant, right? There's all this stuff coming, experience, emotion, information, anatomy, everything's coming at us. And when it's over, you graduate, you pass your practicums and everything goes well. And then, okay, then what? That's really the key for any retreat experience, is to say, how do we integrate this into our lives?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we realized with the Kula is that the flow design oriented towards an individual and not the collaborative and how it was created. But when we orient it towards an individual, it can be a very powerful way of gathering together all of the tools that we're learning and experiences that we're having toward a very clear vision. So intentionally gathering up the tools and then creatively implementing them over a 90-day plan. So it can be reiterated. It's not sort of a life plan that you create. It's just a 90-day plan, kind of a prototype, if you will, that you can then leave the experience with some clarity around that, right? So so when we started implementing this, I started doing it over the course of the 25 is our 200-hour, 25 days, or 31 days are intensive 300-hour, and yours was over a period of 6 months, something like that. So periodically coming in and doing these activities, which again, the lunar thinking and the solar thinking, alternating between each one, using design principles, design thinking, if you're familiar with it, was part of my inspiration as well, of how we can conceive of clarifying what the question could be before going in and ideating. Okay, this is the ways I can solve this, but really getting clear on why I want this question, and then how I can bring it forward. And then, okay, finally at the end of the process, it's what will I do? Oh, maybe I'll make a podcast. Maybe I'll start studying with a shamanic teacher. Maybe I'll, like, those are some of the things that come out of it as potentials. But it's been a really powerful process. And actually one of the first people that was in the 200-hour that I was leading did the flow design. Her name is Genevieve. She's in Quebec. She's French speaker, and she's actually the founder of our French wing of Kula. We like to call it Kula La. But Genevieve is a really beautiful soul. We love working with her. She's doing amazing things, translating a lot of what we do into French. And so she had a really amazing experience with the flow design, similar to what you said. Afterwards, she just started manifesting the things that were on her list and manifesting her. And then she did our 300-hour, and then she did our the facilitation design course, which is the one that I teach around how to facilitate. It's a 5-day intensive focused on lots of practicums about how you design educational experiences, which is really sort of the root of my passions. And she loved the flow design process so much that she said, let's do something together. I'd like to use this. How can we do this? So together we've created this lunar solar design. And it's definitely a work in progress, but we have templates which are essentially available that will lead you individually through it. So if you would like to try the slow design process, you can look on lunarsolardesign.com and download for free this template and go through it. And then what's in the works are individual coaching as well as cohorts. You do it yourself, but you do it together with a group of people, which is sort of like the way you did it. And a lot of insight can come when you bounce off with other people, these kinds of experiences. So we're really excited about lunar solar design, also using it intentionally as a way to support entrepreneurs and creating initiatives, people that have dreams for land projects. Get together and think about all the possibilities before you develop a strategy, and be intentional about the design, that in the way that you can access your creativity, because that's hard enough, right? I mean, let's be honest. It's hard enough to access our own creativity without our ego getting in the way, without our self-doubt. If we can get to the point where we access our own creativity, imagine how hard it is then to do it with somebody else, right? And I really firmly believe that the challenges that we're facing in the world today are not challenges that are going to be solved by one person, by one person's ideas. These are things that are being created by big groups. These are challenges which are very often, think about this, being created by large groups of people intentionally coming together to think about how quickly and how profitably they can extract resources and use them. And there's people that are spending billions of dollars thinking about how to continue extracting as much oil as possible from the earth over the next 50 years. And they're spending lots of intentional strategic design doing this, right? Not just on the technological front, but also on the social front, how to keep people interested and dependent on fossil fuels, how to, all these aspects. And so if we want to come up with solutions, it's not individually that we're going to be able to do this. And so when we get collective, we come into issues, especially in spiritual communities. And this is part of our path, right? That, I'm more spiritual than thou. It comes up a lot, right? But like, how can we, and that's ego. And ego, especially if I'm accessing my creativity, my ego is alive. And so how does my ego interface with somebody else's ego in a way that's going to actually align us and bring us into better, more creative solutions, rather than just kind of a my idea, your idea kind of thing. And so that's what the intention of flow design is to give people and teams and groups tools and supported, facilitated space, because that's another aspect that's really important. That when we're just on our own trying to replicate these things, it's easy to fall into patterns. And having an external facilitator that supports the process can really be the difference of how firm the foundations are of what we end up creating, and how high we build and how quickly we can build needs that fast foundation. And I guarantee that the solutions that are going to save this world are deeply fundamented, and they need to be quick, and they need to get really high and big. And so figuring out how to do this, I've heard a lot of people talk about scalability, and I'm not such a huge fan of scalability. I mean, if you look at the way nature scales, it's completely individual. Every tree in this forest, every leaf on every tree is its own unique. And so it's not like scaling, finding the perfect leaf and then figuring out how every tree to grow it. It's how to get, things going in ways that are uniquely suited to where they are and the time that they're in, right? So I feel like flow design is a really important tool for supporting groups and individuals to do that.
I agree. I thought it was magnificent, and I feel like I could just listen to you talk about things all day, hence why I did the training. I learned so much from you and the other founders as well. An amazing, brilliant group of people that really care about, the earth, and care about different cultures, and care about people and growth. And it just was such a fundamental part of my yogic journey and spiritual journey. So if people want to connect with you or connect with Kula, I know you all have some trainings that are kind of ongoing. How can people connect with the Kula, or how can they connect with you? I know you mentioned lunarsolardesign.com. I'll include that link in the podcast, in your bio and everything, so people can click there. But is there anything else that you wanted to share, or a way that people can connect with you?
Yeah, the Kula Collective. That's THEKULA collective.com is our Kula site. And that's really the center of everything that we have going on. We just actually introduced, and later this afternoon, I'll be doing a live Q&A about this new model. We've been hearing a lot from our students about how to make things more accessible, and also dealing with the transition piece that I talked about before. So what we've come up with is this new fusion model, which what it does is it brings together some of the benefits of doing things online with the benefits of coming together in person. So I think your group had some of that in the 6-month period. But what this does is it has a call a month before the retreat, and then a 15-day retreat, which is more accessible because it's cheaper room and board, it's less time you have to take off work. And then another call afterwards to sort of check in on the flow design process. And so we're really excited about this new model. And you can go to thekulacollective.com to find out more about it and where we're unrolling it, unveiling it. And yeah, here in Seven Springs, we have training coming up in August. sevenspringsretreats.org, sevenspringsretreats.com is our site here. And so we have everything from weekend getaways to Jesse and I are leading a couples retreat for thinking about how to be together as couples did her. I mean, she's the rock to my life for
I
sure. And
adore her.
yeah, I
She's
don't know
so
what I'd do without her.
wonderful.
And our relationship is the root of of my happiness in so many ways. Of
Oh,
our co-parenting, the way that we come together to raise our boys. And so thinking about relationships is something that's really important for us in sharing some of our experience. And so it's just a low key. We'll do some hiking, we'll do some yoga, that kind of thing, and come with your significant other and think about how to more authentically relate with each other. So that's just one of the things that we're doing. Yeah, and it's all on the kulacollective.com or sevenspringsretreats.com or lunarsolardesign.com. I just feel like I keep creating all these
yeah.
comms.
It's
You
great.
know, imahitlan.org was my nonprofit. And
Yeah.
I'll include that link too, although it's
Mm.
not super active these days, but definitely moving away from the .org toward the .com in a way that's regenerative. Right?
Will there be delicious food at that retreat?
Oh, you know it.
I was
Olivia is our
thinking,
chef
I was
these
thinking
days.
about, oh my God.
Sunil,
Yes. Oh, hey,
Sunil.
Sunil, if you're listening, I
Yeah.
made some delicious kale puttanesca pasta last night and I thought
Mm.
about Sunil. I'm like, God, this tastes good. Like something like Sunil would make, but
We miss Sunil. Sunil hasn't been out this year, but he'll be out as part of the YTT. He'll be sharing some of the food that
love
he loves to
that.
make.
Love that. Well, give your love or give my love to Jesse and your children. And thank you so much for being my guest today. If you know any listeners, if you feel the call, check out Kula Collective. It definitely changed my life. And thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks.